Hello and welcome to this Testroid webinar this evening. Our topic today is how to ensure your mobile channels are ready to generate and create revenue on holiday peak days. And I'm actually hosting this webinar today with my colleague Dave Horner, who is actually on a call here as well.
Yeah, hey everybody.
And we're going to actually share some of our thoughts and experience about this important topic, especially how can you prepare your mobile app and web stuff for these extremely important days, the holiday peak days that are soon actually approaching quickly. So we've seen here at Testroid, we've seen a lot of different big app launches and web launches. We've helped people get their apps and games and web stuff robust. But this every year, this is very important time for lots of retailers out there and some other folks as well who actually do e-commerce or mobile commerce, are preparing to get the revenue, a lot of conversions, building a great user experience, and of course retain their existing customers, and also focus on web metrics, how they can actually improve those, in terms of bounces and how much people spend time on websites and stuff like that. So basically, I wanted to keep it as a discussion type of with Dave here at the beginning. And so, Dave, what do you think? You are always in front of the people, talking to them about their problems and what kind of things they confront when they do a big launches. But how do you see this year, especially different from the holiday peak days? How people are actually prepared compared to last year, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that, I think everybody realizes that, mobile is becoming a larger and larger portion of traffic and revenue for their digital channels. And I don't think that that's a surprise to anybody, but I still see every year, and even in talking with folks in preparedness for this year, that folks tend to always procrastinate on what needs to get done to be ready. And so it's constantly a issue of resources, development being late with their deliverables. Everybody has this idealized timeline, but I think we're still seeing where folks are kind of becoming into crunch mode. Now, we're having this webinar here before October, and obviously we wanted to do this to try to help give folks some hope and guidance on what should be done and how it should be done. But yeah, I think it's still a situation of people running up against the clock, and we still hear about these stories of catastrophic failure at critical times by these large retailers or other kind of critical channels within the ecosystem. When it's most important to perform, and so. I personally feel that there's technologies out there, like Testroid and other, open source platforms that can really help folks, really put their best foot forward to be ready. And so, I'm excited about, talking about kind of a multi-pronged approach here, and taking a sound strategy, towards being ready.
Exactly. I mean, this is definitely the most important time of the year for lots of folks out there actually building their stuff and trying to sell their stuff through the internet and their websites, and also, having a mobile apps for even hundreds of millions of consumers. It's a very critical that you have the service available and online all the time. That actually kind of leads us to the agenda for today. So I'm going to start with the brief test road update. We're going to look at the third quarter statistics, what kind of test runs have been done. Then we are talking a bit about the importance of this getting sales readiness or preparing all these channels to make money for you. And also, of course, then we look at what kind of things you can and actually you should do for your mobile apps and web to prepare for that holiday season, especially those peak days. And at the end, we do have a couple of things we can actually propose for you, and also at the end, we'll have a Q&A. So please, at any moment, if you have any questions, please use the right-hand side box, and there is a questions tab. So please use that and ask questions at any time, and we'll be happy to gather those and answer those questions at the end. Starting with the Testroid metrics from the third quarter, we saw the biggest number of unique device runs at our Testroid Cloud. Testroid Cloud, of course, is our open public cloud device with the lots of different Android and iOS devices. So we got over 30 million device runs done during this quarter. There was more than 1 million test cases used, so lots of people actually run simultaneously on different devices. They get a tremendous value when you have one test running simultaneously at the same different devices. You save a lot of time and you get results for your inspection right away. Android was, of course, the biggest still, but we saw quite a big jump on the iOS runs, and that's because we have added a lot of new iOS devices in our Testroid Cloud. There is close to 70 unique models now soon available, and with different OS combos, and of course iPads, iPods, iPhones, all these great devices. The average test took, again, about 3 minutes, 12 seconds. There isn't really big change, so you can quickly test certain aspects of your mobile app or web, or even some mobile games are getting tested, especially on iOS now. Android has been, of course, biggest for mobile games for some time already, but we already see also iOS games getting seriously tested. So what, of course, this statistics comes from the Android. So basically, we've gathered some generic metrics. What kind of failures are caused your app or game or something to fail on Android? And of course, still majority of the issues are related actually to hardware. 55% of those are either related to display, the sensor issues, maybe some other hardware issues like keyboards or notification type of keyboard, Wi-Fi. Also, chipsets, of course, are still the biggest. So there's lots of differences between those different silicon that are embedded in these devices. And size of the memory, also when it varies a lot, it gives some apps perform flaky. On the software side, platform, OS version, OEM customizations, but also some other hardware, software actually are important to get tested if your app, game, or web stuff is relying on this. So just brief these metrics. I wanted to talk a bit more about how do you get your mobile app and web ready for this big season. So these are what we see as the top 5 trends, of course. Like Dave mentioned, mobile is more important than ever. There's various statistics, various surveys out there saying that there's double-digit growth from last year, basically to the what we will about to see in this holiday season peak. And of course, especially in the US, there's these branded shopping days, soon to be approaching. So Cyber Monday, Black Friday, Thanksgiving, and of course the Christmas season is always big for e-commerce. Now in mobile world, actually, this is what Google has told us, but search and purchases are done now more and more in mobile. It's going to soon be on a search at least more than in desktop world. So we are talking serious penetration of new kind of ways you can actually sell and market your stuff on mobile platforms. And then Forrester research says, there's lots of different kind of campaigns, especially free shipping offers, very aggressive email marketing campaigns going on that actually require the effective mobile presence on this holiday season. Mobile web, of course, is important. So everybody use mobile device nowadays pretty much, 85% according to this Salesforce study. And over 50% of the US e-commerce is based now on web traffic, or it's done actually with these mobile devices. And as I mentioned, Google has actually published this information, but over 50% of searches are now coming from smartphones. And when Google says smartphones, they probably include some sort of phablets inside there as well. So it got to be definitely phablets and maybe even some tablets. So what holiday season means for mobile web? It's over 60% of shoppers last year that used Amazon or Target actually did it with the mobile device. That's a significant number, and we are expecting that to grow even this year. According to also these Forrester studies or more research on this field, they actually anticipated that U.S. e-commerce will top close to 300 billion this year. It's a significant part of that revenue are actually done during this holiday season. And of course, the top concern might be not only for retailers, but also for users that what's the mobile internet service? How can you do that with the mobile device? Is it robust enough? These kind of web pages loading slowly or not at all. It's a common source of frustration when people actually see this kind of, and it's of course leading to a bad user experience. Sometimes people just simply leave. They don't shop with you anymore, or they just stop doing that. What comes to apps? But of course, all these forecasts show this double-digit growth for purchases. IBM even says that larger screens are maybe still preferred when you're buying online. And of course, if you have a 40% of mobiles and tablets, there's kind of conflict over here that what kind of device or platform you use to shopping. But nevertheless, these numbers are significant, and they yield that there's all these channels you prepare for your users have to be up to snuff to really get the and deliver that great user experience and eventually generate that revenue for you. Mobile purchases, it's approximately 45 on Android, 45% of Android, and 55% on iOS. So we are seeing this gap getting closer and closer. And basically, it used to be significant for iOS, but now we are seeing Android catching up very quickly. Some of the things with the mobile apps, of course, is that when you consider these platforms, you have a lot of distractions when you use a mobile phone or desktop. But we found a very interesting study where the mobile users are more focused on buying when they do that. So they do expect, they need to have a fantastic user experience. They need to have a very clear, great performing app or web interface to actually do that buying. Otherwise, they'll leave easily. I mean, there's lots of opportunities, alternatives out there, so they might just skip your site and go to the next one. We are already helping quite many of big companies to get their stuff for this peak days and peak season. This is kind of combination from the last year, what we heard, like top failures during these peak days. So web, of course, there was, like Dave mentioned at the beginning, that there was a big retailer failing for hours. Actually, the service was just simply not accessible. That, of course, means instant loss of revenue. Basically, the same happens if your application is crashing or simply otherwise doesn't work. People do not work or doesn't work are the most common feedback you see in an app store or Google Play. And when people see that, they'll uninstall that sort of apps and they'll go to the next one. Another issue, of course, is the slowness. It is both related to the applications and the web. So it will delay your revenue generation. People are frustrated. People are getting actually a bad experience of that. And of course, when they have a bad experience, it will hit your brand. And most likely, people will go to the other sites to buy.
Yeah, in Villavinco, I would say generally it's what ends up in with general slowness and bad performance is that you get higher levels of user abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
And it can happen at the start of a purchasing flow, or it can happen in the middle of a purchasing flow. So you really have to analyze the entire flow, and at any point where somebody's having a bad experience, you significantly multiply the chances of them just completely abandoning the transaction. and how frustrating is that to you as a consumer when you see these folks putting things in carts, getting to almost a checkout experience and then they abandon. And so
Exactly.
that, I think that's a big problem.
Exactly, exactly. And there's obviously need to have some sort of benchmarks for this as well. The what sort of drop rates you might see, you know, as low as you can get that drop rate from that card. Some people have selected something in a card and they eventually they don't buy, and you don't necessarily get the reason why that did not happen, the purchase. It's really important to get this kind of information, and that's why you should really test your website and application before this traffic spike comes, and have these benchmarks. But yeah, there's a great slides more. Actually, Dave can talk about this topic. Generally, we can say about mobile platforms, we've been looking this Android fragmentation for a couple of years now here at Testroid, and it has evolved quite a lot. I mean, there used to be a few big branded models here on the top devices, and basically, if you had those covered, you had a more secure position, and your most likely the apps performed fine. But of course, more and more devices are coming. You have a more diverse environment in terms of these mobile devices and so on. So of course, we've been trying to focus with Testro Cloud that we provide the best coverage globally with these devices. So regardless what kind of new device is coming, or actually your end users are using, basically that that it would be covered when you run your tests at Testro Cloud. That's of course the devices. Then you look at the operating system wise and fragmentation, what's going on over there. You might have those devices, but you might have 17 different versions of Android operating system running that very same hardware with the very same specs. So software will give the flakiness over there, uh, of course, but that's also what we've been focusing here at Testro Cloud and Testro in general. I mean, we produce all different variants that can be out there for those users. So we have over 90% of coverage of that. Okay, just a word about the in the past webinars, I've been talking a lot about verticals, wow, different mobile games and web and stuff. But of course, when it comes to retail, it's important to understand what kind of things people are expecting. Comes to user experience, it comes to functionality, and of course the compatibility of those apps and web across those mobile devices. Screen orientations may be different based on whatever device those users have. And of course, the app or the web experience may be or should be as robust as possible. I wanted to highlight this slide at the kind of end of my section here, because there's two tremendously different things or new things in the that actually will cause mobile phone users some not so great user experience necessarily. There's a new version from Android, of course, the 6.0 Marshmallow, and iOS 9. And what we see here at Testroid, we typically, when we have a new version, we see a lot of errors related to the mobile apps when people start running their test on these. And when there's a new version of kind of like upgrade or updated version of that base version, we will see more and more and more robust versions. That's very important why everybody should test their apps and web on real browsers, using real devices, and using variety of these combos that we actually built for you, especially in Testro Cloud. There's great other things you can also do with other product variants with Testroid, but this is really important to ensure that your apps and web stuff works fine on the latest and greatest. According to Apple, there was just a week ago that over 52% of the iOS users are already using iOS 9. That's quite a high number actually, but it really doesn't happen that quickly. It didn't happen with iOS 8. Android especially doesn't happen that quickly. You might run it for half a year until you get like 20% of the all Android users are using the latest and greatest. So because of that, it's very important to use all those variants that are available there and actually used by these people that actually eventually using it for buying something online. Okay, next topic, of course, how can you prepare? So I'll hand it to Dave.
All right, guys. Yeah, let's talk about some strategies here in which we can use to really get prepared. So first off, I want to mention that Testoroid has the resources to really get you where you want to go. So if you're kind of up against the clock here and you're needing some help, we're happy to step in and really provide consultation and also just testing resources. Right, our organization is built upon engineering as a focus, and so we have test automation experts. We have folks that can do manual testing to get these projects done in time. I want to invite everybody to do a free consultation with us, so that we can talk about specifically your requirements. We can address at a high level what a sound strategy would be, and potentially even talk about being able to do some work for you. So that offer's on the table. Take us up on it. We're offering definitely a free consultation to everybody. Okay. Also, I wanted to mention that we just put out an ebook on this topic around mobile success for the holidays and preparing in holiday readiness. So definitely go to our website. You'll find it under our ebook section of the website. So download that. It's got some interesting stuff. You'll see some stuff that we're talking about today in that ebook. And always feel free to contact us through our website at sales@bitbar.com, or even our other alias at info@bitbar.com as well. But just want to put that out there now so that if you guys are facing crunch time, you know that we're here to help. Okay. All right, so first off, I want to point out that really you really need to test early and test often. And the reason for this is that the cost to fix poor performance or bugs within your applications and websites goes up substantially as you allow those things to get into production, right? So we believe as a company that we need to allow folks to be more agile with their development and be more iterative with their testing. That means testing earlier on in the development cycle, all the way down to the unit test level by developers. And the more tests that we can perform, the more issues that we're going to catch earlier, and the fixes are going to come sooner. And it's going to cost a whole lot less to fix those things than it does before it gets out into production. So that's our methodology, guys, is really being more iterative, testing earlier, testing often, and catching things, and really keeping the cost of development down and fixing issues down. Okay. Let's take a look a little bit at the timeline here, right, guys? So we believe that there should be a three-pronged approach here. We're here in September. At this point in time, we really should be doing functional and compatibility testing for your applications and websites. You need to think that you should have all of this done probably by mid-November, right, before the Thanksgiving holiday. Step two is really about performance and doing load testing to make sure that your applications and websites are ready for increased traffic, so that people have a good user experience with the app and with your website. And then step three is really about proactive monitoring, right? Making sure that our site is always up, or our app is working correctly, that all of the third parties involved in serving the app are actually working correctly. So you're not having bottlenecks happen that are out of control. You need to know those things are happening proactively. So we believe in this kind of three-pronged approach. And you look at kind of the timeline of events. Obviously, as November ramps up, you really start, having this kind of revenue opportunity as an organization. And you definitely need to, keep this in mind when kind of creating deadlines, right? So there's definitely some planning that has to happen. We made it a point to do this webinar in September. We've still got October, so that's definitely important that you kind of understand the timeline. Okay. So we talk about these three stages, right? So stage one is doing functional and compatibility testing, right? So this is really about testing the basic functionality of the application. Are those features that we have in our app, especially the happy paths within our app that lead to revenue, are those things working, right? That's obviously extremely important, right? So we need to be testing the functionality. Compatibility, really this is about making sure that all of your bases are covered. Vilavenko referred to kind of the fragmentation problem earlier, especially within Android. It might be sound to 80-20 rule when applying testing resources to the top 80% of the market. Then really that doesn't necessarily cover everything though, but it's also, you have to understand that it's those folks with those devices that are not part of the most popular group that are probably writing those bad reviews. So our technology is at the heart allowing you to do compatibility testing, right? So we believe in a test automation strategy here. That's what we really focus on. And of course, you're going to be doing some manual testing as well. But stage two, performance and load, it's really understanding how your application performs, during certain scenarios, during load of your systems, and really getting a good idea of where the critical points might fail, or understanding what needs to be improved, right? And then stage three, the production monitoring approach, is really taking the assets that you've built along the way and putting those out to continuously run, and understand where failures are happening as soon as possible, so that you can take proactive action of fixing those issues before all your users experience them. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about functional compatibility testing. So, you have to think that you need to start as soon as possible on this, and I'm sure that some of you guys have already started on this. It really is about being iterative, right? You want to be able to get as much testing as possible, as many testing cycles as possible. So as far as preparing for the functional suite, there are 10 steps in app testing. So obviously you have to think about the install, an uninstall, upgrade, creating new accounts, making payments, upgrading, downgrading service, integrations. When we talk about integrations, think about all of those third-party services that you're using in your app, right? That's critical to test those things, because generally we find that those are the things that actually sometimes can create the most issues, right? And then obviously navigational flows. Is the aesthetic of the app correct? Is it what your designers intended? You have to think about things visually. It's one thing for something to work. It's another thing for it to be an incredible experience. So you have to be able to look at the visuals, right? And you have to understand what the client-server relationships are, right? So you want to create a functional test suite comprised of all these test cases that test these critical functions, and essentially, you have enough time that let's make sure the entire app works. Let's not only just test one path. Let's think about different ways that people will interact with it, and let's come up with test scenarios that reflect that true end user flow, right? You do have to kind of apply your resources wisely, right? You can be completely overwhelmed with the mobile testing challenges, especially around fragmentation. not only do you have different pieces of hardware, but you have different OS versions, browser versions, you name it, and you have to kind of look at statistics. There's a lot of good information out there. If you go to Google's site, you can see what the percentage of Android users are on what operating system. The same with Apple. We really encourage folks to take a look at the market, see where the users are, apply most of your resources to cover the most users possible. And if you can create assets that work in that mode, you can use TestRate to also extend the testing beyond those kind of the core of the market to kind of cover the fringe devices or the fringe scenarios that are out there, right? There's there's really everything that you need as far as the device selections and kind of market coverage within TestRate. So, what is a good mix? Well, that probably includes both phones and tablets. You heard Vilavenko earlier talk about that we see that there's higher purchasing going on the phablets and tablets. So you might want to prioritize that a little bit over phones. But of course, you have to think about the way that folks are using the app. I think phones are generally being used to browse, in a convenient way. And we obviously are seeing more and more transactions through that. But ultimately, we see that a lot of people have a tablet version of their app and they have a phone version of their app. That's great for the user, but that's more challenging for you. So you've got to create a good mix of that and understand kind of what your user behavior you anticipate is, right? The OS versions. This is an interesting challenge. I mean, in Android, you could have the same model, and a user really, could have several different versions of the OS on it. I know personally that, when I'm updating my OS, if I have a bunch of pictures and things on my phone, if I have a bunch of applications installed, I can't install the OS version without going through some drastic measures to reduce my footprint of content on my device. And you have to think that's holding people back from upgrading, or maybe they have personal preferences around the upgrades, but there are older versions of OSs out there, and you have to think about how you test against those. And the performance, and you saw earlier in what Vilavenko showed around the OS version problems, you will find some significant differences in performance based upon the OS version of the device. The screen size. Essentially everybody is slowly moving to responsive design, especially with their websites. This is great for the user. It idealizes the experience for folks. But we see that there's a lot of differences in aesthetic when from one screen size to the other. But then also you have to think, how does my app perform when it's in horizontal mode versus vertical mode? That's another kind of big factor, is that your aesthetic could completely change there. And then even native apps, obviously within the SDK, there's kind of scaling built into these SDKs. But we've seen some weird things around the way native apps display content sometimes, especially when we talk about graphically rich applications. And you have to create a mix of those different screen sizes, and also, like I said, maybe think about testing in kind of horizontal mode. Think about ways that folks will actually interact. Make sure you cover all those bases.
Yeah,
Right.
that's definitely one of the reasons in the beginning of the fragmentation, when people started talking about fragmentation, they primarily meant for the different display resolutions and sizes. But the actual fragmentation we found with the Tessera Cloud data is that it's actually coming from orientation. The operating system might be different, or there's something else going on, and actually the OS or your app or something else in that entity doesn't know how to render that, and then of course the experience is entirely bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, so there's definitely a lot of things to consider there, but we're here to help you try to create a good target matrix. The quick answer is that we have the majority of the devices out there, and so everything's ready to test for you. As far as top requisites for testing, we believe in using real devices. So that's one thing that really test rate offers you is the ability to use hundreds of unique models. This is not testing against emulation. Emulation is part of the development process, no doubt. You should be doing some very early on testing on emulators, but ultimately that's not the real world. So we really believe on testing on real devices. That's what we focus on. We don't provide emulation. Okay. I talked about being iterative with your testing. So we did a study of how many testing cycles within an app release folks do. And as far as version releases, we found that the most agile companies are iterating testing highly frequently. Mostly once a day or once every few days at least. Really, an agile nature is getting the testing down to the build check-in level or even code check-in level. So you have to think that the cycles, the more cycles you do, the more things you're going to catch. And we're here to try to help you be more iterative, right? So there's a cool statistic here. The average was 57, and the testing cycle reduced 1.75% of overall bugs in code, right? So think about that, right? Focus on latest versions like we talked about, but you should pay attention to the older ones as well. We've already kind of referred back to that. Okay. All right, so stage two, performance and load testing. This is really kind of a fun topic. So I know that a lot of people, especially in development and QA, think about, of course, the pre-production quality assurance testing around functional and compatibility and things like that. But a lot of the times, performance gets neglected, right? And so we really believe that you need to have this as part of your strategy, especially given the revenue opportunity during the holidays, right? This should always be part of the process, but you should really step up your game here during the holidays. So, as far as doing performance testing, one thing that we believe is that if you're using good technology, for your QA testing, your pre-production kind of functional and compatibility testing, you should be able to use those same assets here in the performance arena. And we'll talk about that here a little bit more in a second. But how do you prepare? Well, we really recommend that you analyze, the data out there. Look at Omniture, look at Google Analytics, look at some of your, your user data coming off of some of your APM solutions and things like that. If you're doing real user monitoring within your apps, look at some of that data and understand kind of the flow of things. Number one, right? We want to make sure that we measure the launch time, the checkout, graphical content, where's content being hosted. You need to think about all these different factors, right? And it really is quite complex, and we'll talk a little about that here. But really look at everything, okay? And then in preparation, for the load test, you really were obviously trying to run significant amounts of concurrent users at one time with views, checkouts, purchases, web requests. And the idea here behind the load test, in comparison to just doing performance tests, is that you're really trying to find where your systems break, right? And ideally, when your systems break, you actually handle your users in a way that is not a bad user experience. Let's put them into some website that gives a little bit more information. Maybe you have a strategy that if for some reason, God forbid, things fail, maybe you send them a coupon or some sort of make it up to them strategy. But you have to understand when it's going to happen potentially and what you're going to do about that, right? And we believe that we're big on using open source technologies. There are technologies out there, such as like JMeter and BlazeMeter, that will allow you to generate these user concurrency loads that otherwise would have been never possible. So obviously we focus on real devices, but as you're running tests on real devices, we believe that you should, for performance and load testing, you should be running synthetic load generated by tools like these, right? All right. So, when setting up the performance tests, obviously you've done your research. You know how your users are using your app. You know what the intricacies are. We want to make sure that we set up our tools to be able to, graph and trend the performance, as well as kind of alert on the performance. And we talk about alerts here because if you can build in kind of alerts at this point in time in the performance phase, you can reuse these assets in the monitoring phase as well. So we suggest that you build kind of the alerting here and the graphic data analysis tools here, and then you'll be able to reuse those. We believe also that there's plenty of tools out there that are free to use that we do have integrations with that you can use in conjunction with the scripts that you build for performance testing. So things like AT&T Aero, the Qualcomm Trepin Profiler, GameBench, all these tools really provide insightful information to developers that otherwise, if you were just looking from an end user perspective, you'd have no idea what's going on in the background, and you'd have no idea on how to optimize some of these things that you can do on the back end or within the code of your app to make things better, right? And also as far as measuring website traffic, obviously using things like Chrome Dashboard and Safari Web Inspector, those are all going to really help you hone in on things that you can improve. All right. So, general recommendations for performance. So, performance testing really should be done in production, right? That should be everyone's goal. They're really, in the old days, a lot of folks were using technologies like Load Runner and things like that were behind their firewall. You're trying to mimic user loads, in pre-production on systems that just weren't even built for it. And you could try to do some modeling there, but that doesn't necessarily give you what truly your end users are going to experience. So you need to find a way to get all your applications and all of their dependencies out in the wild so that you can really test your systems effectively and truly get an understanding of end user performance. As far as doing performance testing, we recommend that you really communicate with all your third-party partners that provide services within your applications. Obviously, the biggest one would be, CDNs, right? So, modern, technology, really, or good applications generally are using content distribution networks to serve up the heavy content within their apps. And, your CDN is going to probably look at you a little funny if you don't communicate with them on doing these load tests. So definitely do that. And also, any of your other third parties that might be a weak link, you might want to actually ask them, what can you guys handle? I don't want to bring down your system because I anticipate that I'm going to have millions of users, and I would bet that your system's not ready for that. And this also puts your third parties in check as well. If you demand if you are looking at these things in this way, then and you talk to your third parties, hopefully they're going to be prepared as well, and they're going to work on their preparedness, right? And another cool kind of thing that you can do with the assets that you use for performance testing is really doing kind of preheating of your CDNs and your caching mechanisms. So that's kind of one I've over the years I've talked with some of the largest enterprises in the world, and especially the retailers and like content providers that make a lot of money during these critical points in time. They use their performance testing assets to actually prepare their systems for the increased traffic. So running these tests actually right before the anticipated peak load, you could actually significantly improve performance of those third-party mechanisms and your caching mechanisms, right? All right. All right. So another big thing, we talked about, everything kind of in planning, and this kind of refers back to that. You really have to think about how your users are kind of going through the funnel, right? One thing to think about is that, you might have 100,000, for example, here, users they're going to hit your home page. But there's not going to be that high of a number getting to kind of the next conversion step. And you really, as far as preparing your load levels for tests, I would not recommend that you carry 100,000 concurrent users of load to each part of your funnel, right? That's just kind of that's a waste. And actually, when we start talking about generating synthetic load, that can actually become costly if you do that. And so you have to think about really how many users are going to be hitting each part of my funnel as they work through my app or they work through my website. So do that analysis and do this performance testing in a smart way, right? And I will say that as you get down to the bottom of the funnel to payment mechanisms and things like that, generally that's where we start to see some significant failures if you're overloading it. And I mean, that's good to know, no doubt, but these payment flows generally you've got to be somewhat gentle with, and especially if you're using mimic credit card data, this can get quite complex to handle. So just think about the ways you're doing it in an intelligent way. Okay. All right. I referred to this earlier and we talked a little bit about kind of the CDNs and things like that. But if you look at all of the third-party dependencies you have within your applications and websites, you really you get a different view. You understand that all of a sudden, it's not necessarily always on me that the problems exist, but that it can be on these various third parties. And your tests really should test these interdependencies across these other things. And it's obviously we're creating user flows through the app, but as we talked about earlier, communicate with these third parties. Let them know that this is the performance that you're expecting. Give them a heads up when you perform these things. And make sure that all these different systems are ready for prime time when it comes, right?
We actually do have a question related to this topic, so I want to read it through first. So, what are the common issues that web testing typically uncovers, and what are those solutions? So, we of course we are working with the real browsers and real devices, so we see a lot of flakiness in between those browsers. Something works better on other than some other. But in general, the web implementation, this is a especially great picture about it. You might need a load balancing when you build a huge system to cater hundreds of thousands of visitors and users. You might also need some better compression with the graphics, images, stuff like that. Also, of course, the more efficient code in a way that it can handle these kind of tremendous traffic peaks. As mentioned here, and they've said that you might also need some CDNs to actually speed up those luggage pages and the bad experience it provides. There might be also some sort of auto scaling that you need to adapt, but these are the kind of things that we see with the web testing. So I just wanted to highlight it. There was a great question about this topic. So
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. One of the last things I want to say about doing kind of performance testing is that if you're doing this testing for your app, obviously that's the most critical thing. Understand your performance, improve your performance, right? But I would also I would think about doing kind of benchmarking against your competition at this point as well. This is really your chance to shine as an organization, as an application, as a website. What you think of as good performance might be one thing, and it might be good, but if it's not good against your competition, then that's going to be a problem, right? Folks are going to go to the sites, the applications that perform really well, and so even if you've gotten your app to be really responsive, really a good performer, just know that your competition, if they're good, they're probably trying to do the same things. And so at this point in time, I would also say look at doing the benchmarking as well. So you're not going to test your competitors' apps as heavily as you're going to test yours and all your functionality. But if you take those assets that you've built and try to at least just do some very basic performance measurements of your app, I wouldn't worry about load. Of course, you're not going to generate a load against your competitive apps, but you're at least going to do the baseline performance test of just getting the baseline, right? So I would encourage that to be thought about during this kind of performance testing phase as well, is to do benchmarking of your competitive landscape, right? Okay. All right. So stage three, monitoring. All right. So we've talked about developing assets early, being iterative with your testing, developing frameworks that can be moved from quality assurance into performance. We believe the same thing can happen for doing production monitoring, right? We want you to take those same assets, all those assets that you built, and really put them in a scenario of always observing the behavior of your systems in a repeated fashion, right? And gaining critical data that you can take action on to really fix issues, right? So I would definitely recommend, if you've been working on your performance testing, I would somewhat work on this in conjunction towards the latter half of your performance testing, where you build out these monitoring systems, you have them ready, and actually you should turn these monitoring systems on before you're done with your performance testing. This is not, it's not a start-stop with each stage here. They kind of overlap. So because your performance is actually going to put your monitoring systems to the test, right? So think about that. As far as kind of critical flows for your monitoring, obviously you want to make sure that your apps, your websites, everything's downloadable. You're utilizing the latest versions. You're creating accounts, logging, purchasing. And you want to do this at a high frequency, right? You don't want to do this once a day, right? Do a sanity check once a day. That's pretty lackluster of approach. That's not going to cut it, especially during these peak times of the holidays. So we recommend doing this, at least every 10 to 15 minutes. Really prepare efficient comparison results. So there's going to be a lot of test data generated here, right? And you really need to put in place mechanisms that allow you to analyze that data in an effective way. So, be able to compare changes to spot weaknesses. And as we talked about earlier, you need to set up, the alarming and alerting logic early on so that you can be alarmed of these things. You can take the appropriate action in a timely fashion, right? We recommend kind of as far as visualizing data, we recommend checking out Nagios and Zabbix as tools for being able to really create good dashboards and really make insightful use of the data. There's other solutions out there, no doubt, that are proprietary. A lot of those are good, but today hopefully everybody's kind of gotten the hint that we believe in kind of open source technologies, open automation frameworks to kind of drive this, things such as Appium or maybe some of the instrumentation capabilities included within the SDKs, things like that. And so we want to pair these open source technologies with other open source technologies so that you really have a cost-effective way to do these things. Okay. So I talked about this, but you got to get, monitoring is not about running the tests. It's one thing for the person that built the script to say, yes, my scripts run, yes. That's not that's not the goal. The goal is to get insightful information. So the end goal is to really set up the alarm, set up the dashboard, set up the data visualization so that you can make insightful use of that information and take action, right? You want to think about putting in place multiple devices. If I were you, I'd look at what are the most popular devices on the market, and make sure that we have those copies within your monitoring framework, and make sure that that you have your infrastructure set up across different points of presence, so that you can kind of rule out false positives and see kind of the geographical nature of performance. You don't want to just have devices in one location. You really should have at least 2 locations. Okay, and so those are the main things. I will also say, and I think I don't know if I have a slide about that, but there's different ways to monitor. Remember, we're talking about doing real device proactive monitoring. This really allows you to alarm and alert effectively and take action sooner. There are other ways to monitor, right? There's real user monitoring. The stuff that's provided by things like Criticism and Bug Sense, or now what is now Splunk or Flurry and things like that. But keep in mind, that's real user monitoring. That's not going to give you data that you can take action on immediately. You have to wait for those things to trend out before you take action. we believe in a real device strategy so that you can really take action immediately. Okay. All right, so we've talked about kind of the three-pronged approach to your holiday readiness strategy. I want to just mention, about our managed service offering here. So, we believe that if you have the resource, you have the expertise, have at it. Go, build out your frameworks. Do this all on your own if you have the capabilities to. But what I will say is that I don't come across a lot of companies that really have a comprehensive strategy. They might have bits and pieces, and at the end of the day, people are always, and I mentioned this at the beginning, called it always comes down to crunch time. And so if you need help, we're here to help. And here's an illustration of how we would work with you as far as kind of the managed servicing aspect. So you have developments. You're going to go through your sprint meetings, development, source commits. Our managed service is going to source update and build app. We're going to help you set up your CI systems, right? We're going to create and run tests. We're going to generate reports that are insightful. We want to limit the noise. We want you to focus on fixing the issues, right? So, and then remember, this is all iterative. So we're going to feed that back into your development, and you're going to be able to check the test reports, identify the bugs more effectively, go back to development. You're going to go back to your source commits, and the cycle starts all over again, right? So this is what we believe is a really sound strategy, and using TestRate and Bitbar as kind of a second arm of your team, right? To really be able to accelerate the testing, be able to provide better, more insightful information back to your development team. So that's really what our managed service offering is about. And once again, we have the resources to help you, and we have the resources to do it in best practice, right? So I would definitely think about that. Okay.
I want to have a question here. Actually, we have a great question. I'll jump to the Q&A right away because we have a question about the managed services. So, what kind of things you test with the website before the traffic spike, or what can we do? So, of course, we start with determining the what are the testing goals. We do always the complete end-to-end. We use real devices. We use the real browsers. We also start with some sort of benchmark. So we see what's currently out there and how that can be improved. What kind of issues, bugs, related performance issues, performance really makes the great user experience. If you have a capable website or a mobile app, it will eventually build a great user experience for those users. Of course, we also focus on the collecting that data. So like Dave mentioned, we have a really sophisticated way to show that on a dashboard and visualize the data. Also, of course, developers typically prefer the data as a logs and recorded way. So I mean, it's kind of blood test for them. They know instantly from that what's the problem with the app or web, and they can fix the issue. Also, we create a lot of tests. There's lots of scripts. There's typically questions in the test or webinars. What frameworks works you the best? We've been providing and working with nearly all of them. Appium, of course, is the latest and hottest. Selenium works for the web pretty well. But it really depends what kind of app, what kind of native app, or what sort of thing you have and what you want to build. So then, of course, we define what kind of testing environment it should be. So we try to offer as authentic coverage of the audience as possible. We use real devices and a lot of those. And then simply, we execute the test for you. We make sure that, they pass and you get everything reported as a data and logs and so on. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but I'd like to continue this discussion with you on testro.com. You can also always find more information about our offerings, our products, frameworks, how we use real devices, how we do the testing at testro.com. Actually, under products, there's a new page called Managed Services. So under that, you'll find a link where how you can get in touch with us, or Dave is actually on here in a call, so you can get directly to him as well. Salesbitbar.com also is always, if you fire email there, we'll get back to you as soon as possible, and we are willing to help you, especially now when the most important time of the most retailers is coming. So looking forward to hear your thoughts and comments, and please stay active, get in touch with us, and from my behalf, I'd like to say thank you for attending this webinar, and it has been really enjoyed to talk about this topic. Maybe Dave, if you want to say a few words at the end, and we'll end it after that.
Yeah, guys, really appreciate the time today. Hopefully, we provided some insightful information, some food for thought around some sound strategies for holiday readiness of your apps and websites. I really encourage you, as Vilavenko said, communicate with us. We're here to help. We're if anything, want to make sure that at least you guys are getting good information and you're improving your process and doing everything that you can possible to have a great holiday season. So with that, I want to thank everybody once again. Have a wonderful day, and we'll hopefully be talking soon. Take care.
Thank you very much.